boat. Damn near mint condition. Got a Mercruiser 120 in it. Sold by Louis Del Home. I bought a boat from them. We got it running. Customer brought it in for some running complaints. 30, 40 minutes into it, and it starts having problems. We haven't got to that yet, but the carburetor was empty on gas. We primed it, and it started right up, and it's running really well. We did have to adjust the carburetor a little bit. The idle is still just a little high, but the idle mixture is off just a hair. Our customer had to rebuild his own carburetor. We have no reasons to suspect it is a problem right now. But I wanted to make this video to show a few other things, mostly to the customer. First off, the water pump isn't pumping very well at all. We're losing a lot of water out of the side, and that's just a weak water pump. This takes the small impeller from Mercruiser, and it should be changed once a year. So it needs a water pump impeller. That could be the running issue. It does have a working temperature gauge, but the gauge does not read ambient temperature. So once you stop putting water across the sensor, you may get an inaccurate reading on the temperature gauge on this particular model boat. Like I said, the thing is in impeccable condition, but it's got a couple of problems that are going to have to be dealt with. There's a rebuilt carburetor. This is a Merc carburetor. The way we know that is it has two idle mixture screws under there. 1, 2. So that's the way you know it's a Merc carb. I mean a Rochester versus a Merc carb. And it even says GM TrueJet on it. The idle screw, of course, is right there. And you can turn that by hand usually. The thing runs really smooth, really well. He's got a new alternator on here. Lots of new stuff. New fuel pump. New ignition coil. This is a points ignition engine, which is, you know, kind of a pain in the butt, but if they work, they work, right? So, you know, the distributor could be suffering some wear inside and floating a little bit, but it's running really well at this particular moment. Everything on this boat looks in really good shape, except for the fact that the front engine bed right here, this whole area is completely rotted out. There's no more structural integrity underneath there, and the engine has sank from here to here, is down almost, you know, an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. The engine has dropped in the front, which is applying some hard pressures on the gimbal bearing and the drive shaft to the back of it, and we can hear the gimbal bearing making a bit of noise, not like a bad gimbal bearing, but like under one that's been stressed. So that's gonna need to be resolved. Now when we see that, of course, the first tattletales are back here, and we've got these anode bolts right here, and that's a famous leak spot for Mercruiser. They like to leak and the transom rots out. We see some brown staining under here. That shows that water has been leaking out of the transom underneath there. And we know that this transom is no good. Simply by knocking on it, it's hollow. There's no more integrity left in the transom. We put our finger here and we get, you know, my son, he'll lift up on this drive and I can feel this separating, moving in and out of the boat. So the transom is loose. So the boat's going to need a transom and an engine bed, to say the least. And that's a very common spot. We just finished one last week, another one. Nice, clean, older boat that needed that same thing. How's your gauges looking?
Gauge is good. The RPM's on the gauge.
Tachometer's not working. Let me board this craft.
It's on 5, pegged down.
Make sure I'm not getting this floor dirty. Some pretty old gauges there. Gas gauge is bouncing a little bit. Voltage, that's on the negative. That's in a negative, but could just be a bad gauge because the alternator looks new. Oil pressure at idle, 20 psi. The temperature gauge is down in the green, but maybe time for some new gauges. Look at that hour meter. Now, I doubt that's original, but it might very well be by the condition of this thing. Oh, there's the temperature, I'm sorry. So, seems to be working there. Tachometer is not working. And of course that's miles per hour. So really, all in all, we need to put this under load in the tank, but I'm skeptical to put it under load because we're doing a lot of strange things to that transom, and the engine, you know, is nothing secure. The engine is sitting on no supports. There's no support in the transom. There's no support in the front of the engine. So really, it needs the transom and the engine bed resolved before doing anything. I think the power loss problem that the customer may be mentioning could just be as simple as the carburetor running out of fuel. Maybe the float is set improperly, or the engine is getting a little hot, just not showing up on the gauge. It's losing some combustion efficiency, and that's slowing the motor down, and where it'll only idle or what have you. Another interesting thing that I saw in this, being an older boat, is this. Leaded automotive fuel only. Now, this thing's running really well, but if you run unleaded fuel in a leaded engine, it will actually eat the exhaust seats out of the cylinder head, and you have to take the cylinder head off, and have new exhaust seats put in it, regrind the valves, what have you, basically a valve job. But you got to put hardened seats in there. I've done it many, many, many times, and that's a known thing. So I don't know how it's running so well, unless that's the actual hours of 230. It hasn't affected it yet, unless the customer maybe is running a lead additive or something. So the first things we need to address and talk to the customer about is the rotten engine bed down there, and then the rotten transom. See what he wants to do about those, and then go from there. So all in all, 1975 model boat, boy, it's in really, really good shape, and it's kind of expected to see a boat this old to have some rotted wood in it, you know. So we'll go from there, see what happens. Do a follow-up video on if we do the repairs.